General Protocol Spaces, Banking on Freedom.
Welcome to General Bull 32 of N. This one is titled Building Confidence. And the questions that, kind of the topic questions that we put up for this one is why is confidence an important issue for BCH stakeholders to manage? And manage is an important word right there, right? Like not just passively think about, but something to actively manage. What does it take to build confidence? If you assume that it's important, and to what degree, and what's going well, what's not going so well, what can improve. So yeah, it's a pretty wide open, very soft topic, but there's a lot of strong opinions, and it has very specific relevance to things that are going on right now. It's not just a academic question. So we'll get into all of that during the space. And Callan, one of the relevant topics is the current pair of chips that are being considered for Bitcoin Cash. One of them is about the virtual machine limits, VM limits upgrade, change of the VM limits, and we'll explain what that means. And then the other one is about big integers, like an upgrade to include big integers. And these are connected. And there's some issues with them related to,
But
in
yeah,
our opinion, this confidence issue. So we'll get into all of that.
this spaces is gonna be it's gonna be more than that, and talk about confidence on a more meta level instead of very specifically about these two chips.
Right, right. But I'm sure we're going to get into it as well, right? Because it is very topical and relevant currently. So I think we'll discuss it at both levels, the meta level and then also the specifics. But yeah, that's right. The main point is kind of this meta level discussion. Okay, so Unim, I know you've been thinking about this a lot, and you have always thought about this a lot. You're the author of the process that General Protocols follows, the chip process, as it were, and that's something that we take very seriously. And could you give us an introduction? What is this meta discussion that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah. So one thing that I have always seen people getting well, sometimes people would say sometimes I would say confused, and sometimes I would say mixing together concepts, is that when people talk about cryptocurrency projects, um people a lot of times, we emphasize things like, oh my god, does this currency have this feature, or is it the number of users and these things. Well, those things are obviously all important, and network effect is obviously very important. But a lot of times people forget about a thing that underlies all of this, especially the network effect part. They don't come out of nowhere, and it kind of bears reminding that cryptocurrencies are currencies, uh, first and foremost. And I would argue that the currency part actually comes before crypto. Like a lot of coins, they can probably survive just, you know, it wouldn't survive just as well, but they can survive for some time as entries on, I don't know, Excel spreadsheets, in the most extreme case, or in or perhaps in some other accounting software. Like, if you move it to a centralized database and just start plugging in entries on MySQL, whatever, it would continue to work for quite a while. And after all, that is how centralized fiat works, right? Um, but the reverse is not true. If you have the software but not the currency, that is a completely different coin already, and it would have nothing to do with the original whatsoever. So it bears reminding that cryptocurrencies are currencies, and in order for currencies to work, to gain market share, to gain network effect, and all that, people need to have confidence in it. And by confidence, there are a lot of like fancy definitions of it, but at the most basic level, uh, people need to be sure. They need to be reasonably sure that like they don't need to worry about this. That okay, I have some of this coin. I should be able to do the same things tomorrow as I do today. I should be able to do the same things 1 year from now, 10 years from now, in the same fashion as I do all the things I want with it today. And that confidence, people a lot of times people don't care about what are the underlying mechanisms, but the only thing they see is okay, if you break it, then confidence is lost, and losing confidence is actually really easy. Uh, Regaining them or gaining them in the first place is really hard. Um, so this is something that I think a lot of people don't talk about, and that is why people talk about the US dollar is a shitcoin. It has lost value consistently for this many years. Well, but it has also worked for this many years, kind of, sort of. Um, and the same thing with BTC, right? Like, oh yeah, it's also a shitcoin. It has high fees, and it has broke some confidence. Like, for day-to-day transactions, it has totally broke confidence. But it has just been around for so long, and if you have some BTC, um, some parts of the confidence has been broken, but some other parts have not been, and it has just been around for so long. So I think this is generally a context that people may need reminders of when we talk about cryptocurrencies, including BCH, is that at the most basic level, maintaining confidence is important, and if people and we have encountered several events in the past that has lost us massive confidence, which is probably the most important part of how we got to our current market cap, down from a higher place before, and regaining it was a slow and very grinding process. So I think that is a context of what we're talking about today.
Well, we can't hear you, man.
Yeah, no, we're just having an uncomfortable silence. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Hey, Khaled.
Hey, Kellen.
Yeah, I mean, also,
I could try to fill some of that uncomfortable silence. So while Yunam was talking, I jotted down like my intuition for what damages confidence, and I kind of got it in the order I think it matters most. And the first thing I wrote at the very top is bad long-term price action, because sadly I think our price history is the most damaging part to our future price history that we have at the moment. After that, I put down actors leaving, right? The ecosystem breaking into parts and we becoming a smaller and smaller community. And this is something that we have gotten much better at not doing lately. But we still have a relatively recent past with large chunks of the community leaving the ecosystem. After that, I wrote down technical problems, because users get frustrated if they try to use your tools and they don't work. And at the very bottom, I wrote poor stability or availability of the chain itself, because it's kind of important that it's there when you need it. But unfortunately, I've also noticed from multiple other chains that even though they don't work, right? They can be away for like a whole week, or they can, manage transactions, but only governance voting transactions and no actual user transactions because that part is broken at the moment. Even such chains manage to stick around and maintain their value because confidence in those chains does not come as much from those parts as it does from like the things higher up in this chain.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
don't know.
your
Like,
four was losing price, losing people. What was the third one? And the fourth one was technical problems. What was the?
Yeah, technical, like it doesn't work kind of thing.
Oh, there were
Not
three. I thought there
intermittent. It's
were.
just
Were there three of them or four?
there's four of them, but I guess the technical problems and poor stability is kind of lumped together.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Sorry,
yeah,
Calvin. Go ahead.
I would point out that like people leaving also, affects price, right? Because then like especially if the chain splits, right? It's like the I don't know, is it like a quadratic effect in price loss sometimes, like
Oh yeah.
because of the n squared thing about value, like So yeah, they're kind of all interrelated, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I think it. There's some people who still have a different idea, but I think just as a generally very strongly held opinion, a Schelling point in BCH is splits that aren't absolutely necessary are a terrible thing. They absolutely wipe out, like you said, the network effect of
Yeah,
people, the community being split, the people who are holding and so forth. The usage of it gets split because now whatever apps, whatever adoption was done has now been split to some degree. Like I don't mean like just random splits on the chain. I mean like a persistent two different sets of beliefs, right? Like those are just terribly destructive. And I think that's a pretty strongly held belief. Do you think there's? I have heard people who are just like splits are great. We should do lots of them. But I don't think it's a common opinion.
And sometimes it's not even opposing sides. Sometimes it's like half of the community moves onto a sidechain and then that sidechain just fucking dies. That happens too.
BCH, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So, like, one of the things I'm not clear about is some of these chains that don't really work, but like they don't lose any value. Like for 3 days, no one can transact, but like it's still trading at the same price. Like, I wonder, there's also this phenomenon also like where price discovery may not be 100% clean, right? Where exchanges may be manipulating price or wash trading or like low volume coins. I don't know. Like, what is there a recent example in the past of a coin that was like significantly traded that? I know there was one that wasn't working, Luna or something. I know some coin wasn't working for like a week, and then like it didn't affect the price, which is kind of weird.
Well, I think that to some degree or not to some degree, to a large degree, there's a big issue with that where a lot of what is called crypto is not the same thing that we're trying to accomplish, right? There's a lot of stuff that's called crypto that has nothing to do with what we're trying to do. And I'm not saying this in like a dogmatic, everything is crap except for Bitcoin Cash, right? That's not what I'm saying. But it's just objective truth that a lot of the coins and networks that are out there really aren't aiming to be money for the world. And so, the bar for them is completely different than the bar for Bitcoin Cash. So
yeah,
playing a different game is an important point.
yeah, and just to elaborate on that a bit, like once you change kind of status, once you change kind of status, the confidence that people place in you might come from different sources, as Jonathan said, and it's kind of important to be aware of that. Like in the case of Bitcoin Cash, we are not uniquely burdened, but we are one of a handful of coins that at least try very hard to build confidence around being useful, and that is quite a high bar. That is quite a burden. And in the case of a lot, so in our case, like the chain, if the chain stopped working for a day or a week, that would be a big deal. Some other chains that derive its value from being useful one way or another, like for example, if ETH stops working for a week, that would be a super big deal. But in some other cases, the coin might almost entirely exist on exchanges, and the chain is truly just for arbitrage. So, for example, XRP has stopped working in the past. Nobody gives a crap, and there are many other coins in that status. And for those coins, it's not like they are immune to confidence loss events, but it just comes from different places, right? In those cases, delisting from Binance will be a much bigger deal than the chain stop working.
Yeah. So exactly, the game is different. What the relevant metrics for a meme token, for Shiba Inu, Obama Sonic, whatever token, is different from the relevant metrics for money for the world and so forth. Or for Monero also has different, similar to BCH but different. So where, I know an important point, and this might start to get into controversial stuff, right? But where is BCH in your opinion on the confidence scale? Like where is it? How do you think it's perceived, and why is that important?
Well,
I have experience with this, right? From talking to exchanges, talking to pools, and then hearing what they say, and you start to develop oh, this is what people outside of Bitcoin Cash think about Bitcoin Cash, right? There's a perception that's there, and some parts of it are persistent and common. But maybe I can share those later. But yeah, what's your take on where BCH's reputation and confidence is, and why is it important?
well, I mean, we only kind of recently started to get out of that, but for a really long time and until quite recently, we were still known as like that failed fork that has like Fictoshi on it, right? So
Yeah, yeah,
that was horrible, and that was a different part of social confidence that stuck with us for a really long time and damaged a lot, and was really and remained really damaging. Um, so there was
and that's also why many of us, some people think that we're old and crotchety about you know being very picky about who we invite and amplify and so forth. But that comes from hard experience of having crazies create a terrible reputation for us that gets attached to us, and so
Yep.
we know where those things go, and so yeah.
Yeah. So like, what about you guys?
Yeah, so similar thing. I remember talking with the CEO of one of the I won't say the company, but an important company in crypto, and this was back when we were doing just some upgrade. It was not a contentious upgrade at all. It was like 2 years, 1 or 2 years after anything like contentious at all had happened whatsoever. And they were like, and the first thing they said was like, "Are you guys splitting again? Is there another split? What do we need to do?" It was just like a matter of fact. And I was like, "No, no, 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 no. This is not what's going on." And then in other cases, I've had, yeah, lots of times where people are like, "Yeah, but you guys, fake Toshi." Was fake Toshi. When we say that, we're joking. This is the name of Craig Wright, right? The complete fraud who tried to take over Bitcoin Cash, and he was around at the time Bitcoin Cash started. He did not create it, right? But yeah, his name got attached to it, and it's pretty fucking persistent. People still ask and say like, yeah, but fake Toshi is in BCH, and it's like, no, 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 that was a long time ago. Like he's been out
So
for a long time. So these things really persist.
not just that he's in BCH, like he is BCH, like that has
Right,
that
right.
has yeah.
And some of the terrible ideas that he proposed and whatever that eventually became BSV, those still also stick to BCH as well. Yeah, so I've personally felt this when dealing with upgrades and so forth, that um, the reputation sticks, and that confidence is obviously not there in those cases, right? They don't have confidence that it's BCH is something you can rely on. And that's not all cases, right? But it's definitely there, and it's not among just any one or two random people. This is among people who make decisions and that can really impact BCH.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think confidence is returning. Like, you just got to be consistent and do your thing and stop creating problems for people, and then
Yes.
it comes back. Like, I don't think, yeah, but I
Yeah.
remember that exchanges. Like, I think it was in 2021. All we did was like a mempool upgrade where you can do like infinite chains. And I remember like exchanges were like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Are there going to be 2 coins now?
Right.
The last upgrade before that was the one where we split from ABC. So they were like traumatized. But, like since then, like it's gotten better. Like, I don't think, like right now, with every upgrade, we haven't really heard much of that kind of stuff. Like, oh my God, you guys are making 2 chains again. Like, there's
Right.
just, you gotta be consistent and avoid drama and avoid chain splits and avoid like negative black swan events. And I don't know, I feel like the trajectory has gotten better over time.
Absolutely. And it's been an active effort, right? Like we've been very actively recognizing like, oh shit, okay, we need to rebuild our reputation.
Yeah, I mean, just avoid drama and avoid chain splits. I don't know. Yeah.
Or even so, you don't even have to have a chain split, right? Because chain splits in reality, they happen long before the technical actual chain split happens, right? They happen due to strife, social divisions, and so forth, and around some kind of strongly held views on what Bitcoin Cash should be or how Bitcoin should work and so forth. Those things happen early, and I think people also have a sense of that when that strife starts to pick up, that okay, something might happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been an active effort to make sure that we have a way of doing things that encourages and reinforces stability and figuring things out instead of getting into social divides.
Yeah, and I think one way to avoid that, like I think the chip process takes pressure off, because then there's like an avenue for everybody to get their stuff heard, analyzed, get it in the chain. Like one thing that can create a split is like the situation with Omri, where he was basically dictator. That's going to create resentment, it's going to create frustration, and that can just build up to like an explosive level, right? So I don't know. It's like a political question, really, almost. It's like a sociological question. Like, how do you keep people, feeling involved and feeling happy and not have unnecessary divisions over, because of psychological reasons, which I think is what happened with ABC and Nchain and all that.
Yeah, and there are smaller things, right? There are some smaller things that I think a lot of people don't notice nearly as much as the big headline grabbers, like oh my God, chain splits and ticker splits and a entire freaking sidechain dying and so on and so forth. Like there are some other things that I think hopefully we learn some lessons, but perhaps not enough people pay attention to this, so it might happen again in the future. And that circles back to our previous discussion about how coins derive their value and confidence from different sources, and BCH is among a very small handful of coins actually trying to be useful and hence burdened with that. And so a lot of times we would be held kind of accountable, at least in some sense, to how our things work. And if we push really hard for something that doesn't really work that well or breaks things in one way or another, then confidence will be eroded. And one example that most of us, you kind of need to be around for long enough to have experienced that, but some of us has been around for long enough. So and that example was Badger Wallet. Like Badger Wallet, except for the very, very beginning when there was like a dozen users, it really didn't work well. It has kind of never worked well, but people keep pushing for it anyway, and all the way till the bitter end, basically. And throughout the process, it has been a terrible user experience. And it's not just terrible user experience in that it lags sometimes or the UI is not designed well. No. Like people would straight up just like it would just straight up fail to load coins or tokens, and yeah, it was just really terrible as far as the wallet goes, and and people a lot of times really didn't care because that was like okay, we tokens were the thing, and we have to mom, do we have tokens at home? Yeah, we got tokens at home, and this is our tokens at home. And so people kept pushing it, and that was it. And that was kind of terrible. Like anyone who tries to use it just needed to use it once, and they don't need to say anything because they're newcomers, right? Like why they don't owe us any helpful advice, and they just leave. So that was something that was less visible that was also damaging to confidence, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. So, sorry, Calvin, go ahead.
Yeah, but I think that's true, Badger. But that was a long time. Like I think the tools have gotten better, like the user-facing stuff. Like it's just gotten higher quality over time. I mean, I think initially we're all high on the fact that we split from BTC, and then there was a lot of, I don't know, it was just like a Wild West. People were willing to put up with bad tools for a time. But yeah, I think it's gotten better in that regard. Just wanted to point that out. Badger Wallet's ancient history. But yes, that is a good point. Like if the user-facing wallets, are really buggy, that's not good. Not good.
I mean, there are two parts of this, right? Like one part is that the user-facing part is really terrible. The other part is the general willingness to just ignore things that are shitty, that we know are shitty because we know better, and we just ignore it and push it anyway, and that thing ends up being terrible overall. And that part we actually took like at least 2 tries, and hopefully now most of us understand how bad that is. So one of that was Badger. Like, do people know how bad that was? Yes. You only need to open it once to know how bad it was, but we push it anyway because we got token now. And then we fell for this for a second time with Smart BCH. Like, well, that was a bit more tricky. What you need to do to know how terrible it was to run a node. And you run a node, and then you run the node, and then you will understand how terrible it was. A lot of us ran nodes, myself included, and then we chose to ignore how bad it was anyway. That sucked.
All right. Yeah. Let me give a different frame to this. So, building confidence, right? And this is true for an individual, for an organization, for this decentralized ecosystem, anything. You got to first not die, right? Like don't make mistakes. Don't make big mistakes that are going to harm you. That's the first thing. Do no harm. Don't break user space, etc. I think we've gotten better at that. And then the other is do things that actually actively build confidence, right? There's both sides that you have to do. And I think Calvin was pointing out that there's a lot of things that we are improving on. And I think that's totally true. And I think it's worth kind of enumerating some of those things, because we've been through a lot of the things that we did wrong in the past, right? And I say we, and some of those had actually nothing to do with, who is the BCH ecosystem today, but that reputation sticks. But okay, let's say we've left some of that stuff behind. What have we improved on? Like, Calvin, what is some of the stuff that you think we're doing better? Like you mentioned chip, or what else do you think?
Yeah, I think that the number one thing is the upgrades, the chip process, the way that technical improvements happen in a civilized, orderly manner where everyone can participate. And the best ideas sort of make it through because there's a lot of discussion, and there's not like an in crowd that sort of, vetoes everything. Like, you can observe what's happening with core now. Like some people want OP-CAD, and like, it's just like kind of a messy situation because the core people feel really threatened because now you have outsiders sort of making decisions and they feel like they're losing power. And so there's a whole psychological dynamic to what's going on with core.
Yeah.
And I want to maintain that. Like, I think it's great.
And so sorry for interrupting. I just want to point out, and a big part of the chaos that's happening in BTC is isn't just that, oh, there's an in crowd or there's an out crowd or anything, but just the general lack of any defined process, right? So basically nobody knows what's going on, and nobody has ever known what's going on. So what ended up happening is that it devolves into a Twitter fight, and then people talk about, oh yeah, Twitter isn't everything. Oh, so okay, so it's a Reddit fight then, and then it's a Reddit fight, and then it's a mailing list fight, and then you spend a lot of time and energy and you raise a lot of confidence fighting about all this, and then you still circle back to the beginning, and still nobody knows what's going on, and eventually some shadowy cabal emerges and then force everyone into a thing, and then it becomes centralized, but everybody just goes with it. It's the whole no procedure part kind of sucks.
I'd argue it's gotten pretty well documented lately. Just Google for Bipland.
For what?
Bipland. The OpCat guys made satire of the process, and in the process
I was going to say, like,
wrote down what actually been happening over the years. It's a pretty nice explanation of how it worked out.
Yeah, I was gonna say, for anybody who's listening, like, this is complete satire. Like, you go and look, and it's basically explaining how there's no process, and really it comes down to top-down decisions. So there isn't actually a great process, but
they do say it's satire. But if you go through all the points and then you correlate to the history that Bitcoin has over the last 10, 15 years, you'll actually see that satire or not, it's pretty accurate.
Oh, yes, it's accurate. Sorry, what I meant was they don't have a real process. They don't have a good process, is what I meant. It's the process is not a good thing, the way that it actually works. Yeah, you're right. They call it satire, but it's actually accurate.
Yeah, so if my estimation, and I could be wrong, my estimation of the process in Bitcoin Core is that the in crowd up until now has gotten to decide everything, and that's created a lot of frustration. And so now that you're seeing again another round of people feeling resentful of that, and it's creating instability. And I think in Bitcoin Cash, we've so far, ever since 2020 when the ABC left, and then we've been pushing this chip process and a more open way to make decisions. The precedent has been that quote unquote outsiders that are still technically knowledgeable and that can still contribute, and they do contribute. And we've seen changes come in to the chain that have been very sound, been well vetted because there was an open discussion of them. And it's, we have this precedent already that it isn't the insiders making decisions. It's basically people that just really care about a certain feature that they can push for it, and it gets refined. Even with cash tokens, the initial proposal was one way, and there was a fight about that, and then eventually it got refined into something that's really elegant and simple, but just as effective. That's what you want. That's why you have debate in the first place in any domain, in science and politics. You want the best ideas to sort of make it through. And I think with the chip process, we've been able to do that. And it's really a social thing. We've all just agreed that that's what we want. It's hard to enforce outside of that, but just having decent precedent in a chain is good. And I think we've done that for 4 years. So that's good. We just want to keep that going, because you don't want a situation where the insiders are making all the decisions, and then at some point it becomes a psychological battle where they feel threatened, their power over it feels threatened, and then they end up just ignoring good ideas because it didn't come from them, which I think is what's happening now in Core, if I understand correctly. Although I don't follow them so closely, so I could be a little bit wrong, but that's what it's looking like is happening with them. It's a psychological battle for power more than a technical one. And I think we want to just focus on technical things, and also, keep the chain as, don't do huge breaking changes unless there's a huge justification for it. But that in the chip process, that gets, elucidated. So.
Yeah, that insight was not necessarily obvious, right? We went through 4 years back in the day of arguing with Core before 2017, and even through that whole thing, there was still probably, I'd say, a majority that thought this was a technical problem. And then it took us meaning BCH ecosystem, 2 very hard punches before we kind of came to our senses and realized through the efforts of people like IMU Name and others that, hey, this is actually a social problem. This isn't a technical problem, right? It took us a while to get there.
Because you get mired in the details, and you argue about the thing, but the thing really has a larger context. I think Mike Hearn, when he rage quit, didn't Mike Hearn basically say, "No, this is a psychological problem"? He rage quit. You remember that?
Yeah, he recognized it, but then he gave up instead of fighting. He thought it was over. Yeah, he figured it was over.
Yeah, I think he just decided it wasn't worth his effort. But that's
so other things that are going better. Obviously, price has been doing much better, going up instead of down. That's a good thing, right? So price is getting better. I'm going through this list that Jonathan made. The price, the people, the number of people is definitely growing. So obviously, when you have a big enough group of people, there's always going to be people going in and going out, right? That's just the way things are. But like the number of people and the number of new names and faces and people that I have no idea what they're doing all kinds of stuff is absolutely increasing, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, we had the most people right after the fork in 2017, and then it got eroded away over time, right? The Unchained people left for BSV, and then the ABC stuff wasn't good. That's with the community, and then Smart BCH again left a lot of casualties. But now that's reversing. I think we reached a low point as far as involvement. I think probably in 2022 was the rock bottom in terms of community size, and I think that's reversed as a trend. It just feels that way, like you're saying. I mean, people showing up, building interesting things. It feels like it's reversing. And then we just want to continue that. We want to have people involved, right? You want the community to grow because that's the value of money, right? The more people that use a coin, the more valuable, the n squared effect of network effect. So
yeah.
Also rebuilding that active network effect of people using it in local adoption, right? That's bigger than it's ever been, honestly. Now, but sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that we've actually had 2 conferences this year related to BCH, or the Argentina one is upcoming, which is quite a trend reversal compared to how many gatherings we had in the years before. So that's kind of some signal to consider there.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean, of course, the whole COVID thing did put a damper. There's been exogenous factors beyond our control. Like the COVID thing really put a damper on conferences. And then at the same time as the COVID thing, there was the community split during that year. So yeah, it's like 1-2 punch. It's like, how hard can you get hit in the gut? But yeah, right. I definitely think it feels like there's a trend reversal as far as all this stuff is going, which is good. I mean, it's good. You want to go back. You want to recover.
So let's force the UNAME to come up with some positive things that have been improving that we haven't said already.
It's 2024. It's an even year. It's an even year, and it's almost September. We don't yet have a life-altering disaster yet, and it doesn't look like it doesn't look like we are gonna run into a disaster anytime soon. So by December 31st, I would officially declare this as a turning point year.
Okay, hold up. This falls into the do no harm category, which is true. Don't die. That's one of the things we need to do. No, I'm gonna force you. I'm gonna force you to say something actively positive. Like, what is something you're actually doing better?
Sorry for people who missed the joke. This is kind of a conspiracy insider joke that Bitcoin Cash faces some big catastrophe every other year, and it's all in even years. So this year is 2024, and we don't have anything so far, and we don't look like we're gonna have anything
break the curse
anytime soon. So we're gonna break the curse. It's gonna come. But yeah, in terms of specifically positive things, I think I think our this kind of started with introspection, and it got rolling faster and faster through cash tokens, and recently, the revival of the VM limits chip and the emergence of Cauldron and Cashanize and all the other projects. I think one positive development, although this might or might not be directly related to confidence, is that we are discovering new venues of making the chain useful. instead of just like having really old ideas. Not that they're not important; they're important, but all the just rehashing all the old ideas again and again and again. It gets it's not that effective at attracting new interest from other people. So an even lesser part of confidence that is talked about even less is that we also need to be able to show people that there is that there is something exciting always going on, like at one point or another, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be protocol change. In fact, the protocol is probably the least important part of that, aside from accommodating those changes. But new applications and use cases are getting developed in a robust way, and I think that personally to me is something that is specifically positive, that is pretty exciting. Oh, and of course, I don't like to toot our own horn, but General Protocols has been doing exciting stuff as well. So
Yeah, I wanna reinforce that because and even expand on it. So the somebody, I don't remember who it was, called it like the decentralized organization. I called it like the decentralized brain or the decentralized executive suite or whatever. That level of understanding has definitely been growing and expanding, where people don't have this overly simplified notion of there's somebody in control, because there isn't, and two, that can the devs do something, like is the software developer like the definition of the chain? It's like absolutely not, right? For real decentralized organization, or however you want to frame it, to be successful, you need all kinds of talents doing all kinds of important things, right? Marketing, sales, organization, promotion, development, building, quality, etc. All of that stuff is needed. Shit posting. So if you're going to have all that stuff going on, that understanding that, like, hey, slash someone, right? Someone has to do all this stuff. That understanding has definitely grown, where there's just an understanding that you can't just come up and say, hey, BCH needs to do this. If you have that idea, well, go do it, or make it happen. Take ownership. I think that level of understanding that responsibility and ownership is necessary has been growing. So I've been very happy to see that. And one of those parts of it is the entrepreneurs, right? This growth of entrepreneurs. There's now several companies building active products, earning revenue, using the BCH network and working globally. So that's fantastic, because with that means there's revenue. That means people are going to start hiring. There's jobs. There's people working on it who can do it as more than a hobby, or if you happen to be wealthy, you can do things, but you can't depend on that. So regular people can start to get involved doing work and so forth. So yeah, that's a big part that I'm very excited about, and that's where I've totally seen the number of people expanding. So the people that are available, that I think on a daily basis, like, hey, I'd really like to work with that person. I wish I was richer, or I wish General Protocols was richer, so that we could hire that person and that person. Like, that number, that list that I have has definitely been growing, and then it's much larger than that we could hire. So I'm excited about that. It's great to have it.
So one thing I think is gonna be productive in promoting BCH is to be more specific about the things we already have. For example, when I see King.com, who is probably the BCH promoter with the biggest following, he promotes BCH in a very generalistic way, like, oh, BCH is my favorite coin. And then you see in the comments a bunch of people say, yeah, why not my coin? Why not my coin? And I wonder if King.com, for example, knows about these amazing apps we already have, like BCH Pool, BCH Guru, and many others, BitGree, because I never see him promoting any of these specific things. And if he knows about this, I'm not even sure about that. If he knows about BCH Pool, for example, maybe it would be more helpful if he was more specific when promoting BCH, like, oh, BCH Pool, BCH Guru, whatever, you know?
Absolutely. And not only like for influencers and people like that, but just in general, this has been a recent discussion where one of the ways this kind of decentralized organization has a big kind of gaping hole is in what you would traditionally call marketing and sales, right? And it's been a struggle to figure out how to do that because, just like development for open source and for a decentralized ecosystem works in a completely different way than it does for a traditional company. In the same way, marketing and sales are necessarily going to work in a very different way than it does for traditional companies. And it's still a thing that's hard to solve. And so what you're talking about is basically sales, right? Having people who, get in touch with Kim.com, whether he's, directly involved or not, getting in touch with influencers and letting them know, like, hey, did you know there's all this stuff going on? So yeah, it's something that we could still improve on, but still doing better. We're doing much better than we were on understanding what Bitcoin Cash is, why it's important, and promoting it. So people like in the audience, Cheapy, Cheap Lightning, has been doing a huge amount of work to just make sure that the word is out there and accurate. Just simple things like making sure that every site that talks about BCH has accurate information about it. Like that's one thing that just wasn't true in the past. There was all kinds of misinformation all over the place. So yeah, I think we're doing better there. Bruno's
Do you
gonna
know
raise
if
his
he
hand.
knows about all these things, or
What's that?
do you know if Kim.com knows about BCH Pool and all these other apps? Because as far as
We've tried to let him know. I've never got a sense that he was really interested in knowing more about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think for him, he's like a freedom fighter type. At least that's his following. I think for him, just the fact that it works is Satoshi wanted, and it's potentially positioned to, be an answer to tyranny. It's freedom coin, right? I think for him, that's the big draw. Like that's how he sort of sells it. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I don't know what's in his head, but that's why he's detailed about this whole stuff. I don't think he spends too much time on it.
Well, he made that whole site, right? Like, why Bitcoin Cash? He made that site. I had somebody make that site, and it shows his side of it, right? And he's very focused on the global money, global payments, cash market. Like, he just presents it as a simple business proposal, right? This is the market size. This is what BCH could do. It has an incredible amount of room for growth. That's pretty much how he presents it, which is reasonable.
Yeah, I think that's what he's most passionate about. So yeah, just disruptive, the answer to global domination and hegemony, right? That's his whole thing. Like he really is worried about that. So I don't know. That's what it seems like. But yeah, that slide he made was really nice. Yeah.
Hey Bruno, do you actually have your hand up right now?
No.
It's up on my screen again. Oh my god. Okay, so I'd like to, Jonathan or anybody else who's on here, did you want to say other things that kind of we are doing better to build confidence? Because I wanted to get into a kind of a third zone of discussion after that.
Well, let's move on to the third thing.
Yeah, so the third thing is the gray area, right? So here's where I'd like to get into specifics. Uname, is that okay? Are you gonna murder me? Yeah, so here's where we're gonna get into some specifics. So there's a particular thing going on right now, and that is these chips that I talked about, right? There's the VM limits chip, which if I try to summarize, it just says loosen up these restrictions that we have on, I'll just simplify and say smart contracts. Loosen up some of the restrictions in a very careful and conservative way to let us do more with smart contracts without having impact on the scalability of Bitcoin Cash. So that's one thing that we're working on. Is that a fair summary, Callan?
Yeah, because
of the VM limit.
Yeah, because some of these applications we're talking about that rely on smart contracts hit a wall with sort of the limits that are in the Bitcoin script system right now are they were sort of arbitrarily chosen in haste, like in 2009 and 2010,
Yeah.
and they haven't really been fully re-examined in a long time. And
That's right.
no one has done the work to examine them. And so now, we want to unlock some contracts that are not possible now will be possible, and some abusive use cases of the VM, which are possible now, will no longer be possible. So in the end, like, everything will be just more regular. But yes, that's
Right.
That's one of the chips that's on the table now, the VM limits.
Yes, and very importantly, in addition to that, is that it won't impact scaling. So that's why there's so much research needed for it, right? And testing and so forth, to make sure that we're not opening up any vulnerabilities or doing anything that would harm the scalability, because still being able to scale to the whole world is an absolute top priority. So anything that would harm that is kind of like by default out. Like, no, it's not happening.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, the data that I'm getting right now is, if anything, it's going to improve scaling, because you're eliminating some of the abusive things you can do now in a block, like hash a billion times, like just make a transaction take like 100 times longer than it should. Like, that's going to be impossible. Right. But it's going to open up like smart contracts that are quick to evaluate anyway. Just right now they're arbitrarily limited for a reason. So yeah, it's actually going to help scaling. I think the way that's what it's looking like. But we're still evaluating. We're still looking at it. So me and Jason are working on this, and then we're going to present our work to everybody to try to find holes in it.
Right. And as far as the chip process goes, that chip has been through a lot of work, has been around for years, has been thought about, has been beat up. And there's always some level of last minute work, right? There's always some level of that. But it's been around. It's not a surprise. Anybody who's interested at all has had years to look at it and think about it. So it's in one place. Like, if we look at the chip process in the context of, hey, we really need to build confidence and make sure we don't do anything wrong, and we do good things to build confidence. It's in that nice position of there's a large consensus that it's going to do good, and there's a large consensus that it's not going to cause any problems, right? So it's in a very strong position to be included. And that's not absolute yet, right? That it's still going through the chip process. But I'm just going to say, like, from my perspective, that's how it looks to me. So here's where we get to the gray part. Now, there's this other chip that has just appeared in this month, earlier this month or last month, I don't remember. But and it's about big integers. So I call it the big integers, because we already did an integer upgrade, and this is a further integer.
We called that one. I think that was colloquially referred to as big integers as well. And that was
it was.
And now we're like,
it totally was.
Integers, which is like, going to make that look small. So yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
But
I just call it big integers.
I mean, I'm usually more comfortable calling this one big int, because for the previous one I didn't refer to as big int. The previous one I just called it 64-bit. So
yeah, but anyway, but the point of this new chip is to similarly to in line with the virtual machine limits of making smart contracts, opening them up in a conservative way to make them more powerful and more space to do things, is the big integers. Because it turns out when you're doing things in smart contracts with money, a lot of what you need to do is math, not just logic, but math. And so with the small number size, like the space that you have to work with for numbers is relatively small. It used to be tiny, like really, really hard to work with, because at General Protocols, we struggled mightily with the old integers that we had. They were very small and very hard to work with. And then we doubled the size of it. So then we have the 64-bit integers, and they're much easier to work with, but they're still really, all things said and done, still pretty small. Because when you start to do any kind of interesting math, it's really easy to break the limits, have a problem, have to do workarounds, and so forth. And so it would ideally be really nice to have much bigger numbers. Yeah, go ahead.
One concrete example is, so before we had the 32-bit integers, and they couldn't even fully capture the number of Satoshis that exist, right? Because that ends up being a number larger than like 2 billion or whatever.
I can make it even more specific. Like, we had the NaHedge contract, and because of the way it was calculated, we did it like as simply as we possibly could and removed all kind of room for screwing things up. And it basically meant that you could only have a contract that was worth like several $1,000s in BCH if you were doing it in US dollar terms. And so that's, from a financial perspective, that's a toy. It's not even a serious thing. And so, yeah, so we found a way to make the numbers bigger and work with larger numbers, but it was so complex and it created so much risk, right? Because complexity is the worst enemy of safety and security. So yeah, it was just really bad situation. And so 64-bit made it easier and better, but it's still, like I said,
Right.
all
So
things
now
considered, a pretty low
the wall
ceiling.
you hit, yeah, the wall you hit with 64-bit is, of course, we made cache tokens, and cache tokens actually have 64-bit amounts theoretically. You can have a 63-bit,
Right, right, yeah.
Well, yeah,
amount for your
not just cache tokens. I remember we had some pretty ridiculous stuff, and 64-bit like solved the most ridiculous of those all. I remember like any hedge contracts used to have like a 40 BCH limit, something like that. And that was absolutely nonsense.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going forward. Like, so yeah, 32 bits you couldn't deal with satoshis, right? That's sort of the case I'm presenting. 64 bits now you can't fully deal with cache tokens in an elegant way, right? You gotta like do other stuff. Like I know like Cauldron has this problem because when you're doing a swap, you want to have like a constant, so you have to multiply by, you can end up breaking the 64-bit limit. So in the process of working on VM limits, it became obvious like we have this like awesome way to just quantify every operation the virtual machine is doing. And like Jason had a eureka moment. He's like, we could just throw big integers into the mix because now we have this like, we have a formal way to like quantify the virtual machine's execution. So why not just unlock big integers? And sort of that came up late, like in the chip process. I think that's where this discussion is going, right, Emergent? You're saying that sort of this.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. Yeah.
It came up late, like at the last minute, because as the VM limits was becoming more concrete as a thing, the big integers sort of popped into existence in mine and Jason's head, and then we've been sort of like really pro big integers. So, which is it came up really late, like it hasn't gone through. VM limits has been in discussion since 2021, I think, and people have been talking about it and shooting it down and arguing. And then that in itself is great. Like when you have some long-term like discussion, you have time to really think about alternate ways of doing things because the VM limits has evolved over time just because it's been sitting around for so long.
And the understanding of what boundaries are good on it and which ones might be done better in a different way and so forth. Yeah,
and that isn't the case with the big integers. It sort of came up really recently as something that, oh my God, we should just do this now. Like, because we have this formal way, we have this mechanism now of thinking about execution cost. And the big integers does immediately solve a problem, which is the fact that you can't do math properly on cache tokens because you can end up breaking 63 bits or 64 bits with cache tokens.
No, even with any hedge, even without cache tokens, it's still really easy to break that limit. Like you do, math, right? You multiply two numbers, and you don't want to be multiplying two numbers and have like this fear that you're gonna break your whole contract just by multiplying the two wrong numbers that are slightly too big. So no, it's even without cache tokens.
Yeah, so we're like, let's just throw this in. Now's the time. Otherwise, we have to wait another year. So that was sort of the impetus. And so I understand that there's been like skepticism of big ints because it just popped up out of nowhere. It's like, what's going on? We had a chip process. So the big integers doesn't have to happen from my point of view. Now, but I'm going to try to do my work with Jason to just present the data, and it can sit there for another year or two or whatever. It doesn't. There's no reason to fight over it. From my point of view, I'm not going to fight over it. So that's all I want to say. But yeah, that is a point. I think this is where this is going. I'm sort of reading your mind.
Of course. Yeah, that's absolutely where it's going. But I want to present it in a certain way, right? So yeah, you could say that, but I want to try to steel man it, right? Because Bitcoin Cash Authis is in the audience here, and he doesn't do audio. So I'm I'm channeling Bitcoin Cash Authis. I have him on text where he's yelling at me the things I should say. No, I'm kidding. He's saying stuff that we could talk about. But to try to steelman that, right? There's the other side which says it's not late in the process. It's not late. There's still plenty of time, and there's been a lot of work done, and there's really strong evidence that it's a good idea and so forth. So what against that, like how would you steelman it? Because there's half of it, right, which is don't do the wrong things, don't do bad things that harm confidence. But then you can't only do that, right? Do no harm doesn't work as a total solution. You have to also do good things. You have to create value and create positive things. And so at an extreme, you become ultra conservative. The chain consensus ossifies, and you do no more changes, right? And you do no harm, so to speak. But of course, we know that that will actually do harm if you don't keep doing the engineering to actually reach world scale. So right, so we're in that gray area on this chip between the do something and don't cause harm.
It is extremely gray, and I would have to be honest. Like if this was brought up like 3 months earlier, I think like cash tokens for a time, like cash token didn't sit around gathering opinion or dust or whatever for like a long time. Cash tokens, I remember, was presented like it was first presented at like February or March that year, which at the time we thought, okay, for such a sprawling huge chip was already kind of late, really late actually. But people scramble at all hands, and we got it through, and I think everyone involved should be rightly proud of themselves. This one emerged in late July / August. Like if it was presented like 2-3 months earlier, I would be all I personally would be probably be all over it, like that this is the best thing since whatever. This is the best thing since last year, and it
64-bit integers.
Yeah, I know. And we'll be in a much better position to get it through and get it through in a reasonable way, and gain confidence and gain consensus. But at some point it gets into a gray area, and then and then even later on, like if this is presented in say October, then there will be no gray area. Then I would just like come out strongly against it. No, please don't do it. Please don't fuck it up. Like, but it is right now, so it's what it is. It's in the gray area.
Yeah. So the way I see it, and I could be wrong. Correct me if I am wrong. So with cash tokens, you have a design problem too, right? You want to design the system so that it's future proof, that it's not stupid. So then, you need a lot more time, right? You have to specify what can these tokens do? What are their data fields? What are the, how does minting work? How does everything work? How does total supply work? Like, there's just a lot, like, it's like a design. It's like trying to build a house from scratch. Like, you have to hire a designer, you have to hire an architect. With big integers, this is just me trying to present an argument. It doesn't mean that I don't want to fight over this.
Right.
But with big integers, like, we all understand what numbers should do. Like, division is defined mathematically, multiplication, like, there's nothing you can screw up design-wise. Because we all agree about what numbers should do mathematically. So then it's just worrying about the details. Like you don't want to get the consensus rules ambiguous where it's not clear, I don't know, what happens if you break 258 bytes, like that should be clear. But those are really tiny details that are easily specified. So it's a little bit different than cash tokens in that regard. And like with cash tokens, you really need enough time. Everyone has to see the design. Everyone has to be able to comment on it. Everyone has to sort of worry about it and come up with ideas. And even with cash tokens, like it became, because it had been specified so early, like towards, I remember like in July of 2022, people were still, you can simplify this, and then that simplifies the design, and that was still happening, And with big integers, it's like, the number has this precision now. Like it's, on that side of it, it's really simple to specify. And the devil's in the details of big integers, because the problem is you don't want a buggy implementation, or you don't want an implementation negatively impact scaling or performance, or, it's like a disaster. Like, like you make a poison block that takes 10 minutes to verify. Like, that's the kind of thing. That's the risk there. So the risk with big integers is different than the risk with cash tokens, which is double. Like you had the risk of performance, but you also had the risk of poor design. With big integers, you don't have the risk of poor design because we understand how numbers work, but you do have the risk of just breaking the chain. So there is risk, I agree, and it is late in the game. Yeah, that's all. Over.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I wanted to present, so Bitcoin Cash Office is sending me some stuff, and I want to present that. So I want to present what he has to say, and then also kind of another side of the coin. So the messages he sent me are, the process for big integers really started with the VM limit chip, right? That's a totally fair point. But like Callan was just saying, they're tightly connected, right?
Yeah, it became
So
like
that's a-
obvious. Oh my God, we have this mechanism for like measuring everything. Oh, let's use it big integers as well. Like that way we can, we can win. Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically, that's when
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, he said that too. He said it's not like Big Int came out of nowhere. It's an offshoot of the limits chip. So,
Yes, and they're
so
interrelated.
here's the part where I'm going to present the other side of the coin. He says, so the process is already the process. He said the process that's done for the limits chip should count for Big Int 2 in great part, which is probably like, yeah, probably that's true. I don't think I would even argue that. I think that's true. And then he said, similar to SIG hash UTXO hash tokens, right? That there's some emergent part of the specification that at near the end of the process, it's like, wait, this thing makes complete sense to do this one extra thing. Yeah, fair enough, fair point.
Okay, that's true. SIG hash UTXOs, which changes signing fundamentally. If you have that set, yeah, that came out late as an offshoot. So yeah, that's one argument in favor of the Big Int, that you can have stuff come out late.
Right, and specifically the part that that Bitcoin Cash Authors is saying is already handled in is the budgeting part of the VM limits chip. Hold on a second. Is the budgeting system for the VM limits chip is where the integers have really already been processed and dealt with and taken care of, because as part of doing that VM limits deep dive and deep exploration of what it means to scale, what it means to have a smart contract, what does it mean for CPU and so forth, you have to look at what mathematical operations cost. You have to look at what they cost. And part of that cost is related to the size of the integers. And so all of that work, it's very fair to say that a lot of that work is there. It's part of the VM limits chip, and that's totally fair. I won't argue that at all. He says Big Int is just a detail in there, and absolutely. So I completely agree with all of that. But I'm going to say the flip side of it, which is, although that all may be true, it has not been vetted. And all those things are assertions at this point, right? And we've kind of come to the point where so in my opinion, we're still at the point where you have to do good things and you don't want to do harm to yourself. The don't do harm to yourself is still a deep, deep scar and worth paying attention to. And part of doing harm is you verify, right? And so when there's an assertion, you don't just take that because the people doing it have 150 IQ, which probably Jason and BCA both have, and Callan too, I think, and you name probably also.
Yeah, but you can have 150 IQ.
High IQ people.
Mistakes ever. So that's sometimes having a 90 IQ, you're smarter. Like no, not always. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, right? Like we can't work on assertions. That's my flip side to this argument, is that although all those things may be absolutely true, and I probably think they are, it has absolutely not been through the vetting process, right? It has not been vetted. There's not been enough eyes on it. The evidence isn't out there yet, and so forth. So you cannot argue that it's not late. It is late in the process, that something that has been vetted for years is not comparable to an assertion that has just come out. So that there's a flip side to that. But again, it's a gray area, right? So I think you can tell from the way we've been talking about it, like Uname and I, that we would fucking love to have these giant integers. It's really useful and very nice thing to have, to not have to worry about and be able to do math freely in contracts. Huge value, both to the what you can do and the safety and the reliability and all kinds of benefits. Right. So we want it. We absolutely want it. It's just a question of this deep scar of doing things that cause us harm, and being absolutely sure. And then there's an additional element here. So I personally, just off the top of my head, came up with a list of like 7 things that I'm not confident about this chip, and I don't think those are trivial points. And so the chip itself isn't well developed, and it deserves to be very well developed. So I think there is a strong argument on both sides, right? That this is valuable and we should do it. And there's also a strong argument on the side of, no, it's not anywhere close to the level of other things that we have done and the level of confidence that those chips inspire. And for me, the do no harm part takes precedence, right? Like doing good things is great, but we could also do a good thing next year. But doing harm is something that especially with one-way upgrades, right? Like these upgrades go in one direction, and it's very hard to undo a mistake, as you can see with ordinals and so forth on BTC.
It's
Don't
suspicious.
want to
Like,
leave any room for a mistake.
So,
yeah, if
so,
you
so
look at the
what?
chip, it's like TBD, TBD. It's just like just a skeleton of a chip.
So,
Yeah,
so I
like,
want so I want to talk a bit about why having having a sufficient public discussion and vetting period is important. So it's so far we look at, oh, it's just another integer upgrade, right? And maybe it would be really straightforward and it's just a benchmarking thing, it's a performance thing. But like things can come up in the vetting and discussion period, and those things that come up might not be what you imagine. And I want to bring up a specific example, and the specific example was that for the cash token discussion, I remember cash token spec came up in I think February or March, and people were all wow, like this is like the best thing since sliced bread, and everyone's so excited about it, and the discussion was mostly being about, okay, so how do we format the thing to be backwards compatible, and this way looks pretty good, and because Cash Artists even have a parallel chip going on in terms of like the new op group, and that eventually convert that this two paths eventually converge. But I think one thing that emerged only quite late in the process, and I think it only came out in like June or July, like a few months after this was first brought up, was activation strategy. Like it took several months for that to come up at all. Like before that, nobody even thought that activation strategy was gonna be a problem, like whatsoever. Nobody gave it a thought. And then and then somebody brought it up. I don't remember who brought it up, but oh shoot, we can't just activate it. And then Callan would remember this more clearly, like, oh yeah, like Patfo is gonna be a problem, and how do we actually deal with that? Deal with that in a clean way. And then there was a big discussion. There was a big discussion. We have a strategy about it. So things like this things like this can actually come up. So it's not like, okay, we imagine some things, and those things that we imagine would be all the things that are ever important.
And when a chip sits around for a year and people are like a little bit upset it didn't get activated, then they have time to really ponder, oh wait, we should think about this too, because there's like plenty of idle time. It's like beta consciousness or whatever, where you just come up with creative ideas. No, I get that. And this chip isn't even fully written yet, so there isn't that much that it definitely doesn't have that going for it. That there's time to think about it.
Like
there could be unknown unknowns. Like there could be stuff that we just didn't think about, and then like because it's short time, there's no time to think about them. So no, I get that completely.
Yeah, little things. Yeah, there's it's hubristic to think that your first idea will have encompassed everything that you need to think of, right? Like that's just hubris, especially in technical design, right? There's always some angle you didn't think of. Somebody will poke a hole in some part of it, and so forth. So yeah, I think probably the numbers are pretty straightforward, and I don't think it'll be a big issue. But I'm also not personally willing to be like, it'll probably be okay, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I do want to bring up another example, but this is kind of in the other direction. I don't know if you guys, I don't know if that many people remember it, but there was another very minor chip that is the one that is restricting transaction versions to V2, so that future transaction versions could be used for other purposes instead of not being terribly useful. So that one was like I would say that one was as close as it gets to as close as it gets to clean and non-fuzzy. Like it would be truly hard to come up with any like complications about it. And well, it's been activated for a while, and nothing came up anyway. And correspondingly, at that time, that chip has sat around for a while too. I think Tom wrote it, and it has sat around for like 1 or 2 years. For 1 or 2 years, was it 1 year, something like that? And there wasn't that much interest about it, but enough people have seen it. But there, and then and then I think it was the 2021 or 2022 cycle when when the lock-in period came and go, it came and went, and then people were like, oh, why is this not activated? Oh, whoops, we kind of just forgot about it. and then the next cycle it went in without too much fuss. So like fairly actually really simple chips exist. It's not like every single thing needs to be we need to like force everyone to look extremely closely, like, and we need to have like a quorum of 100 people or anything like that. It's not always the case, but big int is probably like impacting a lot more things than restricting transaction duration. So,
well, I don't know. It depends. Yeah, because it's just more data you're manipulating, so that's scary. And then there could be bugs in the implementation. But yeah, even with TX version, which is like the most obvious, simple, like even that benefited from sitting around for a year because we had time to think about, oh, well, did we miss anything? Which with big int, it seems scary and it seems really sudden. And so I totally can see the point. Because imagine TX version had been proposed, in like August or whatever, or September, right before like code freezing for November. Like, we'd be nervous. We'd be like, oh, we wouldn't think about something. Maybe we didn't, we wouldn't want to put it in because it didn't have the time-tested value of just having sat around for a while and had people think about it.
The thing about the thing that makes big int more complicated than restricting TX version, at least as far as I can tell personally, is that you just have to comprehensively go through all the opcodes and see if there's any weird interactions that come out. Like how does it work? How does it work with say num to bin and bin to num? Like, would there be any super weird things? Like I can think of like, okay, straightforwardly thinking, okay, that shouldn't be a problem, but is there any weird permutations that can come up with these interactions? Like, what about other opcodes? Like, somebody has to go through them one by one and things like that. So it's not impossible, but the work hasn't been done yet.
Yeah, no, and just having it sit around for a while, like that, that gives people time to just sort of think about it in a relaxed state of mind. You benefit just having something be like a proposal that's a year old or 2 years old that people have had time to consider. That has a maturity to it. The fact that no one in a year has found any major problems with it, that alone is valuable, right? Like, whereas with big int, it just came out like it's not even fully finished yet. There's like TBD, if you look at the chip. so it doesn't have that going for it at all. Like, it's just like no one has had time to consider it. Like, I concede it completely, and it would be in that regard risky, because then you don't benefit from the fact that it sat around and nobody found any problems with it. You don't benefit from that at all. Like, you don't, that's like you're taking a little bit of a risk. I totally get it. I totally understand. I totally concede, and I totally 100%. I understand that. Yeah, it's completely valid, 1,000,000% valid.
Let me present though, because I have Bitcoin Cash with me in the room. He's a spirit in the room, and he's pushing, right? He's saying, and again, these are valid points. He's saying, okay, this needs to be vetted. Then just fucking vet it. Just do it, right? Just do it, because what he's saying here, which is also probably valid, which is we've already done a 32 to 64-bit integer upgrade. Seriously, what's different about a 64 to X size integer upgrade, as long as you confirm that it doesn't cause some kind of performance problem. And so that's a valid point, right? Like, rationally, there's no real difference here, and it should be just fine. So he's pushing back and saying, no, just fucking do it. Stop whinging and just do it, because we've already done integers before. So that's his assertion. Yeah. So that's.
Can I jump in there?
Too. Yeah.
Yeah. So as an outsider, I could argue that going from 32 to 64-bit integers is something that I can see as a relatively straightforward thing now that our computers are working out of 64-bit architecture with CPUs that have 64-bit instructions for doing a bunch of things. But when you move to arbitrary size integers, then doesn't implementations change quite dramatically? And if they do, my experience working with JavaScript and their number implementation has a lot of things that could go wrong in various places. And that means, of course, that it's going to be up to the nodes to determine what implementations of all these numbers do they want. But at least from my perspective, a 31 to 64-bit, when we're already on 64-bit CPUs with 64-bit instruction sets, is quite a different beast from 64 to something we're not already hardware optimized for.
Yeah, no, that's a valid.
Right. And Bitcoin Cash Office is saying in DM, he's like, yeah, that's valid. There's extra risk because you have to have some kind of big int lib, especially for languages like C++. It's easier in Python and honestly, it's easier in JavaScript because of the big int standard that it adopted at some point in the past. So yeah, there's some parts that are actually different here, right? But he says, but we can vet it and we can do test vectors and we can we can be confident about it. I'm going to ask him while we're talking about it to explain to me why. So Bitcoin Cash Office, can you explain to us why you think it's important for this to be done? Not just why is it a good idea to do it now and a bad idea to wait? So can you expand on that? Not just that we can do it and therefore we should, but what's the balance? Put some nuance on it. Why is it better to do it than not? And I wanted to list up some of the things that I had. So specific things, right, about the chip. For example, like Callan said, it's to be determined on some parts of it. Some of the things that I had with it that bothered me were the costs are not explored at all. That's a completely to be determined thing. And that means activation costs, and that means ongoing costs and development and for users and so forth. None of that is explored in it. Exploration of alternatives, right? Because when you present one thing, you can't just present that thing. You have to show very convincingly that you've thought about all kinds of other possibilities, whatever other possibilities there are, and you've compared to them and you've said, no, this is a superior solution. This is a clearly better solution, or they're the same and we just have to pick one. There were some like that when we did introspection where it was like, we could do it this way or that way. And it was like, it doesn't really matter that much. So that was another issue. There's a part of the chip that says, basically anybody who's using numeric overflow, which is what can happen if you do a multiplication and the number's too big and it's like, oh, that's too big, fail. The contract fails, right? Anybody who uses that is doing something wrong. And that's a very wrong idea, I think. You cannot say something like that because that's basically user space. People have a thing and they work with it and it works a certain way. And to say that they're using it wrong, that's something, Linus Torvalds would rip you a new one for saying. You don't just change something and say that anybody who is using that, quote feature is doing it wrong. You just can't say that. And so I think that kind of reveals a little bit of a lack of depth on the chip.
Yeah, it's totally not finished. I think he just quickly wanted to say that, that's going to fail validation. But yeah, no, the chip, if you look at it, it's tiny. He put a scale.
Right.
He's on vacation, or he's actually going to come back Monday. I hope he finishes the chip. sometime next week. And
That's
then,
cool.
but yeah, no, it's it's pretty silly. Yeah, none of this. The chip isn't written, like none of it fully. It's just there, like as a proxy. So yeah, of course, it's going to
Right.
be like offensive to your eyes.
Right. Okay. Let me go back and read. If you guys want to talk, go ahead. I'm going to read what BCA is telling me about the question that I asked.
Can I jump in and make a point about the cost before you move subject too many times? So the cost of activation is actually potentially higher than many might see, because there's an implementation cost before we can actually do the activation, and that implementation cost is going to be different depending on where it is being implemented. And I get that JSON probably has no problem to actually do this implementation and get this working well in like libauth. But has anyone talked with Knut about how they are going to handle it, or Verde, or Bitcoin Unlimited, or any other party that implements?
As far as I know, which is bad.
CDN?
That's another red flag. Yes. Reach out to.
Yeah, that was actually one of my issues that I listed on Bitcoin Cash Research. Also, it was like maybe it's not going to be a problem, but maybe probably doesn't cut it, right? Like you really have to do. And Uname has made this point several times that there's technical work and there's social work, right? Because the chip is fundamentally a social process, and you got to get that buy-in, because if half the people making, I mean, nodes aren't the whole ecosystem in any way, but if even the nodes, like the things at the center of the network, even if the people writing the nodes don't yet agree and have vetted something, like, yeah, it's definitely not vetted yet. So that's a completely valid point too. Callan, were you going to say something? I got a reply from BCA here.
Yeah, no, I should probably reach out and talk to Fernando, and also just to float, if they can just offer some ideas. I don't think I haven't spoken to them about the big
Okay.
The big sort of came up like 2 weeks ago, just as I was working with Jason on the virtual machine limit chips, and
Right.
sort of encourage each other to, hey, throw out the big int. Maybe people want it. It doesn't have to happen.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you raised a good point, Jonathan. I really should reach out, and I'll probably do that after we finish the spaces. I'm going to reach out to Fernando and to Josh Green, just because I haven't spoken to them in a while. Anyway, this is going to be a reason to talk to them. So anyway, but yeah. But even I was going to say one more thing, even about implementation details, like Python and JavaScript. Maybe I don't know about JavaScript, but Python thinks about numbers in a weird way when you do division and modulus, which differs from the way the Bitcoin virtual machine thinks about it. And so even stupid things like this need to be in the chip. they bias.
Oh, yeah.
They round in a different way than. You get a different number. You get a different answer when you divide in Python versus when you divide in C++ or in the machine. Like it's just, or modulo, especially with negative numbers. You get a different answer with negative numbers.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's like stuff like that. It just isn't even in the chip because the chip isn't written so fully. It's just like placeholder.
Those are things that probably should have been specified back with the 64-bit, but didn't totally get specified. We basically need a hard IEEE type integer specification that covers all the math, all the operations.
I mean, we're sort of relying on the fact that implicitly all of it should be done the way C++ does division. So people just sort of understand that. But that hasn't been specified well. That should be somewhere, actually.
Yeah, the edge cases always get you. And that should have been specified with 64 also. Okay, so BCA is making this point. He says, so I asked him why do it now? And he said, if we don't do it now, it will mean 1 year of, I'm just reading what he said, will mean 1 year of doing nothing. The same work we can do now will just get stretched to a year from now. And we'll do nothing for 10 months and then again do all the work in the last 2 months in the next cycle. Also, the sooner we do it, the less risk of an overflow issue breaking something in user space. That is a valid point. We're still small. We know all the builders. Will next year be the same? Will things have grown so much that it's harder to do next year? Golang and Java both have their own nice big int libs. I doubt it'd be much burden implementation wise. Yeah, so all of these things I completely agree with, and at the same time I repeat my opinion, which is it's too much probably things going on here for a BCH chip because of the huge risk of what could go wrong. Those famous last words of what could go wrong.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's risk on either side, right? You know, and maybe this artificial risk, like, oh, like one thing is you could do a shilling point if you want to sabotage a project, is like, oh, we have to do this now, and you're all idiots, and you know that sort of destabilizes the social situation. You know, we want to get in that situation where people feel rushed, and you know, like you cannot totally like imagine someone sabotaging Bitcoin Cash by doing stuff at the last minute like this. They're like promises to like, oh, we're gonna unlock Bitcoin Cash, we're gonna make it awesome, we could brag about 258 byte integers, and you know, you guys are idiots for not going along, and like, you know, you can create just rift and division that way, right? So, you know, one thing to do is just like respect this chip process, and let's, you know, hold our, you know, let's cool it.
Yeah, you know, like there are some there are some other really good arguments with this that was not yet elaborated, like just how much this would change, you know, the math implementations in some of the applications that would even exist today. So you know, like for Cauldron and stuff, right? Right now, places that need to use workarounds, perhaps within this year, like if Big was activated, then they could move on to something much simpler and then build on top of it, instead of having to wonder about you know, should we build on top of our current workaround, or would we need to change to something very different. I think you know, General Protocols went through a similar process a while ago with 64-bit and stuff. So yeah, even the reasons might be able to elaborate further on that process.
Oh, you want me to show you those cars too? I have those. I can show you. So yeah, yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. There's another cost which BCA didn't mention here, which is the one that you named just mentioned, which is uh, as long as you don't have it, the people who are having to work around it continue to be saddled with the cost of doing these workarounds. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, because
And
they care about that because they're dealing with cash tokens that are at 64 bits already, so they have to multiply that by some constant, right, to figure out if the swap is fair or not. And then so sometimes they, you know, if they're in the, yeah, so they have to implement workarounds currently, Cauldron, to you know.
yeah, just like we did in the past, we had to do some crazy workarounds for precision and so forth with math with AnyHedge, and still fit within the tiny VM limits that we used to have that were even smaller than they are now. Yes, so yeah, I don't think obviously we're not going to have a conclusion here because there's not a top-down decision being made, and at the end of the chip process, everyone decides for themselves: am I going to do this upgrade or not? And I'm still personally in the camp of I would absolutely love it if all of these issues got just like sorted and just like slapped down in the chip tomorrow, and it was like, holy shit, this thing's amazing, and they've really considered everything, and there's a really depth of thought on all of the various issues that need to be considered. I would absolutely love that because I want it to happen. I just have to see if that's going to happen, and then at some point, for me, the shelling point of the process is more important than whatever benefit you get from the upgrade. Because, like Callan said, if you start to just treat the process as a suggestion, as just maybe a kind of a good idea or a guideline, of course that happens to some degree. But if you really start to do that just as a regular thing, then what it really means is the process doesn't exist. And as soon as the process doesn't
It exists, but it's
I don't think we realize what a bad place we're going to be in. So yeah,
because you can end up at like actually breaking the chain, right? You could have some bad actor just shove something through at the last minute, you know, that he knows that it's like a 0 day that he installed, and
yeah,
you know what? That's
and
the worst.
We literally went through that. We literally went through that with, I mean, not a 0 day, but we literally went through that with BSV, right? Like suddenly at the last minute, ABC promotes something that really pissed off certain people, and you know, that was CTOR. And on the flip side, whatever, some BSV people wanted to do some, from my perspective, really insane things with the virtual machine and so forth, like deep opposition to. Anyway, last minute stuff is really dangerous because last minute stuff, if it's given weight, forces people into red and blue camps. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does.
people to choose a side. You don't ever want to be in a situation where you're forcing people to choose a side.
Yeah, and it can create division and tribalism. Yeah, it's like one just. Yeah, it can create social instability, like psychological. It traps people psychologically. That's the problem.
Yeah, and look
Yeah.
at how much time we're spending here. We've just spent an hour and a half with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 9, 10, bunch of people, right? We spend a significant amount of time here talking about it. That's a cost. I have a
Yeah,
lot
but I
of
don't know. It's
shit
also
I'd like to be doing.
exciting. It's interest, right? You know, we don't have to do big end. It's just it's cool that it's like there's a buzz. So that's to me that's
Yeah.
all. It's all gravy. Even if we
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, and aside from talking at a high level, I also want to obviously this doesn't necessarily apply to like other people. This is just my personal opinion, right? So like the reason I'm not outright I'm not outright rejecting it, and instead still say that okay, this is in a gray area. There are two parts. So one part is that it remains really attractive as a proposal, both to our own company and also to the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, other actors as a whole. So there is the part where it's attractive, and for the other part, I would like to suggest some concrete steps if people would like to see it activated this cycle anyway. So at least this is for me personally. Again, this doesn't necessarily apply to other people. And other people might have other standards. Maybe their bar is lower, maybe their bar is higher, right? So there is the part where we need to know how BigInts perform in different implementations and different languages. At least the one that we currently know are being used. So there is C++, of course. There is Python, and there is JavaScript, and there is. We probably need to we probably need to take care of Golang. We probably need to take care of Java. So at least those three, maybe beyond. So the benchmark and performance parts people have talked about exhaustively. Well, not exhaustively, at least relatively a lot. But I want to expand on what I brought up just now, which is that somebody also need to look exhaustively at how the greatly expanded limits interact with all of the opcodes dealing with numbers, and not just in the sense of okay, would this work, but also okay, what kind of limits would this opcode subject itself to? Like for example, in terms of opmol, like okay, so you have you have 28 by 258 by times 258 by then what happens afterwards? What kind of overflow behavior is out there, and that needs to be documented and publicized. And so it's not just opmol, but also other things like I brought up, like okay, bin to num to bin. Maybe they're not big deals. And in all likelihood they're not, but somebody needs to document all of this cases exhaustively.
Yeah, clearly specified, well specified. It's not this. I mean, this is yet another symptom of the fact that the specification isn't written, which is also,
Yeah, I know, right?
argument for yes, this is in a gray area right now. Absolutely.
And I would say that once that list has been compiled exhaustively, then maybe we're looking at the bare minimum. The bare minimum of okay, maybe this can be seriously considered. But before,
not yet. There's also alternatives. Alternative number sizes, like alternative byte sizes.
Like what if we just do 256 bit? Would that just be a good idea? Would that just like eliminate a lot of the headaches? Maybe. I think that's what Ethereum uses, right? Something like that. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So there. Yeah. To reiterate, we'd love to see it. It's just this gray area is a very serious thing. It's not something to do.
I mean, it's not. The chip isn't written really. It's just like, oh, we're exploring doing this. It's like, oh no, what are you guys doing? Like,
Right.
absolutely. I just want to
Right.
say, like, it's interesting that the original Bitcoin didn't have any limits, like, and then like Satoshi quickly scrambled. There's an interesting history there. Like he initially had like infinite precision integers. He was just relying on I don't know what on hope, and then he quickly scrambled like in 2010 to implement like it was 258 bytes then his first limit on integers. He was using the OpenSSL BigInt library. And
Yeah.
then,
I mean, there was a lot of things like that I think that was the case with block size too, right? There wasn't any explicit block size limit, but it turned out there was a practical block size limit because of the messaging limit in 32 meg, and that and it in practice it doesn't matter whether you spell out loud explicitly or not. Like actual practical limit matters, and it's worse if you don't spell it out because then you have to hunt for it.
yeah, no. So yeah, but I was just saying, like, it's an interesting history how, like, and so I think one of the deep motivations beyond this chip is also like, oh, let's go back to as corny as it sounds, let's go back to what Satoshi initially wanted with the VM, if we can, without being destructive. I think that's like this for me. That's the psychological motivation behind this. On top of the fact that it actually unlocks some use cases that are pretty interesting. Like if you have really large numbers, you can do like crypto stuff, contract.
It was funny because while that's, I mean, kind of generally true for me, actually, I had the opposite reaction where I was like, wait. So this number of bytes was chosen because that was the OpenSSL or that was what Satoshi chose? I was like, that made my paranoia, not paranoia, but my like yellow flag go up, right? I was like, wait, that's not a good reason to choose a number. We need like an actual rational reason to choose a number.
Given our history.
Yeah, a lot of
given our history.
Yeah, a lot of it is just like really he quickly scrambled. Satoshi himself quickly scrambled, and he snuck in a patch because there were so many exploits possible. They're chosen as proxy values, just like, oh, this is safe.
Oh, I mean for Satoshi, yeah. For Satoshi, I meant for us, like doing an upgrade now, like choosing the number that he happened to choose back then as the right, like that needs further justification. Is that really a good number? Or,
yeah, actually, Jason is actually in the ballpark of leaning towards like just have the number be the maximum push size. So, like so right now the maximum push size is 520 bytes, or with the VM limits chip it'll be 10,000 bytes. So you have a 10,000 byte number, which is like 2 to the 80,000. But and so I actually did the benchmarks on that. It's like it's the same as just like any other data manipulation you do. Like it's the same as reversing bytes, like doing math on that. So right. It's not like particularly dangerous on the C++ side, but it's just kind of scary to think about. Like, oh my god, a 2 to the 80,000 number. Like, what do you need that for? What's going on? Right? It's just crazy.
What you doing over there, buddy?
Yeah. Right? But he's simulating the universe, like
calculating pi on chain. Yeah. All right. Okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna
written like it's clear to me that it's not mature. Like you guys are right. It's in a gray area. A gray area is being kind. It's in a scary area. Maybe. I completely understand.
All right. So I'm gonna wrap up. So I asked BCA if he had any last words. He said we can do it in 2 months. So he's gonna double down on this, which would be great.
I'd like to see. I'm curious to see, and if like even in a week or in 2 months or in a month, like where this is, and then if we decide, screw it, this seems risky, or hey, I'm okay. Like there's still time, but yeah, I agree. It's in a very, very, very gray, very extremely gray, so gray right now.
So gray right now. All right. So I asked Jonathan. I think he said nothing special to add right now. You name Callan. Any last words before we wrap up, Bruno?
No, I'm really excited. This was actually a very stimulating conversation. I feel like my blood is running through my veins, and I feel stimulated. So this is good. I don't know. It's cool. Like, yeah, very cool. I'm really happy. So this is good.
Yeah. Well, aside from the fact that right now it looks like for the longest time my personal worry was that there seems to be a very real demand for a VM limits expansion sooner rather than later, and my personal worry was that that might not happen if we go around chasing like something much bigger.
Yeah, but they're not
And
mutually exclusive. I think you can activate VM
but-
limits, not activate.
yeah,
big.
yeah, but
Big is actually
right now it seems like no matter what happens on the big in the side, like at least some part has a lot more certain. At least some part of this the limit side has a lot more certainty to it. So
Oh, yeah.
I'm personally pretty happy about this.
Yeah, me too.
All right, and BCA is one of the handful of people who really shows ownership and takes things and actually runs with them and makes things happen. So I look forward to suddenly the chip going into this amazing state. I don't expect it to happen, but I would love for it to happen. So yeah, I like this approach to things. But whatever it is, yeah, let's not do things that cause us to lose confidence and do things that cause us to gain confidence by doing good things and not doing bad things. All right.
So
we've been on this for a pretty long time. Yeah, go for it, Kellen.
Yeah, and one source of confidence loss is people just arguing and dividing up into camps. So let's try not to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, social divide is where it happens. It always happens far ahead on the social layer. So I think it was a good discussion. I'm glad we could have a chance to talk about this. And BCA, I hope I did you proud. I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with your assessment of things, but I hope that I presented your side faithfully in how you think about it. So yeah, we're going to sort things out and things are going to be okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for your time. It was great to talk with you and look forward to talking with you next time.
Yeah, it was great, man. Thank you.